we're back on track. We have 3 speakers this semester, and the first one to join us is Shaun Hurley. And what's your wife's name?
Samantha.
Hi.
She's not a part of the presentation. Though. She's gonna...
Does she have a seat?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Okay.
It's okay. I don't know if Taylor is there, so.
I don't know.
So Shaun's the first of 3 this semester, and then we have 4 next semester. Actually, some of next semester's speakers I've actually recruited because, for example, someone once said they wanted to do some app development. They did some app development, so we're looking to connect with where you want to go, as well as connect with where you have no idea you want to go. Shaun Hurley graduated 2005,
Yep.
So the same as Rachel. Okay,
Yeah.
I think of you as later than that, but anyhow.
I was more mature. Well, that would make me younger, actually. So that doesn't work.
You left here more mature. Shaun came to us from Adirondack Community College and transferred in for your 2nd semester.
Yep.
And Dr. French was on sabbatical that semester, which is how you wound up in my class, because I wound up in his class. What else can we tell them about Shaun Hurley, Paul?
I've got really good jokes.
He has the high jump record.
He has the high jump record for Oneonta, and actually did an independent study with you, doing a video analysis of his high jump technique, I
Yes,
recall.
yeah.
The other thing I remember about Shaun is he arrived and he had one goal in life. And that was to design roller coasters. That was his singly stated ambition all the time, you say that.
I
And he
know.
was clearly focused. But he helped us with a couple of the grants we had at the time and became an exceptional tutor. And actually had quite a following of people looking for help with physics. And then you went off to Georgia Tech,
Mhm.
and I have no idea what happened after that.
That's perfect. That's right where I'm taking that.
Good.
Did we start the recording?
I think Michelle
Yeah,
started it, but Shaun took over because he knows more than any of us.
That's true.
Well, thanks for coming, guys. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I'm currently not a roller coaster designer, so it's not that exciting, but I'm a learning experience designer at a company called Pathstream, and I'm going to get into that towards the end, but I wanted to kind of take you through my journey from Oneonta to where I am today, and just kind of share some of the things that I've learned along the way. Some of it applies just to me, and kind of how I reflected on how my decisions and like my experiences shaped where I am today. But like Dr. Gallagher said, I graduated in 2005, and I transferred in from Adirondack Community College.
That's 20 years ago.
I know. But,
I know, we're so old.
yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Rachel.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I obviously graduated in with a degree in physics, and I also ran track and field, and I was a rapper at Mills Dining Hall. And I know I don't have to write it that way. It sounds cooler when I just say I was a rapper, but I just felt like I needed it. It just sounds better. I don't know, but I get it. Like in writing, it's not that cool. But one of the stories I do want to share, and I'm sure you knew I was going to go here with this, Dr. Gallagher, but when I got here at first, I was getting up way too easy. I would come running to Dr. Gallagher's office all the time, and you know, he'd help me out. And it wasn't that I was like truly stuck. I mean, at the time, I thought I was like actually stuck. And he, you know, just gave me this talk, and it's like, you know, I don't even remember exactly what was said, but I know it was like that day changed my life and turned everything around. Because honestly, I remember walking away, and I was like mad, and I was like, I'm never going back into his office again to ask him for help. And I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. And I was like, I'd be working on the problems and I would be able to make way more progress because I was determined. I'm like, I'm gonna figure this out. And then I did go back when I truly got stuck. But when I did come back, I knew I was able to, I feel like, articulate exactly where I was stuck, what I had tried. And it was like, I was like truly actually stuck at that point. And like, I learned how to actually ask questions and figure out where I was stuck. And again, I had to say thank you again, Dr. Gallagher, because I swear to God that day changed my life. It like, I really started truly trying, I think, for the first time in my life. Like I was really putting in 100% of my effort. And I learned I really wasn't. And I mean, I don't know. So that was like a huge.
But it wasn't easy for either of us.
Yeah.
It was kind of injured because you were
Are you
really
still mad at Dr.
Yeah.
and yeah, so anyway, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
No, yeah, I mean, I was just like, it was really more like, I don't feel like, thinking back, it was more like, I don't feel like pushing myself anymore, or at all. How do you do this? And I don't know, it was really like enlightening. But the other thing I thought, I was always thinking I was like further behind than everyone else. I thought I was putting in like way more time, that everybody was able to like get through problems faster. And I felt like I was spending way more time on the homeworks and studying and things like that. And as it turns out, I was putting in more time than most, but not all. I was putting in, I felt like more time than all of the people who dropped out of the physics department, out of the physics program, and found out that like, towards the end of the program, when there was only a handful of people left, that they were all also putting in the same amount of time, and I just didn't really know about it. And I started working together, and that was another huge takeaway for me, was that as much as I wanted to just like kind of be by myself and like work through the problems, I always thought like that was more my personality. There's like absolutely nothing that beats sitting down in a group, or at least with one other person, and talking through the problems and studying and preparing for tests and working through the homework problems. It was just, 1,000 times more efficient and effective than trying alone. Even though I still kind of consider myself more of like a independent person, but it was just working with other people was so much more effective. So I was obsessed with trying to get into the best possible college I could. I mean, like Dr. Gallagher said, I knew I'm going to be a roller coaster designer, and I want to get into the best college possible. And I studied forever for the GREs and got into a few schools and got denied from a few schools. And I remember, and I don't know, Dr. Gallagher, if you remember this, but we were in the hallway. I was like, I don't know what school to go with. I don't know, what should I do? And you said something to the effect, well, I like the mountains, so I'd probably choose, this. And I'm like, no, I'm not asking where would you prefer to live? Like what? And I ended up choosing Georgia Tech. And so I started there with my master's in civil engineering. And I was really surprised to find out, like, I thought I was like prepared to go in for war. I was thinking like, this is like a really great engineering school. And it's a master's level. And it was like, the classes were no more difficult than Oneana. I was kind of had this perception like these big schools that are known for programs were better and you like learn more. It's like there was no difference. As a matter of fact, I feel like I was like getting a way better education here because I was able to talk to the professors directly. In Georgia Tech, I was working with the TAs who were like a couple years older than me, and I don't know, I felt like there I was more like a number, and here I was like it was a much more personalized, I guess. So the thing though is I found out pretty quickly I'm not a city guy. I started to I was feeling like really depressed, and I felt like I was becoming this person that I didn't really like. And then I'm thinking back, Dr. Gallagher's right again. I should have thought more about the location because it was like living in the city. There's something about it, and it wasn't for me. And it was like taking a mental toll So after one semester, I did leave, and I had some friends in the Orlando area. I did an internship for Disney. It's not what it sounds like. I sold turkey legs. So, but I met some friends there, and so I ended up moving down to Orlando, and I got a job at Universal Studios. And I was thinking like, well, I still want to design roller coasters, so it'd be cool if I could get into a theme park and try to be like a mechanic on a roller coaster or something like that. So I ended up getting a job as really more like an assistant mechanic. And I knew nothing really about that stuff. The guys would be like, "Hey, can you hand me a 3/4 inch wrench?" And yeah, you got it. And I like hand him the wrench, and he's like, "This is a hammer." It wasn't that bad, but it was not any. I was very outside of my comfort zone. But once I made the decision to just like go and try it out, like it really wasn't bad. I really did learn a lot. And something else that was interesting for anyone that might be going into engineering, that a lot of the mechanics were talking about, and I saw it too. We would do a lot of preventative maintenance. So we would take the trains off of the tracks, and we would like strip all the hardware off and put new hardware on. And trying to figure, they had like little hacks for getting all this hardware off, and these engineers, they never think about the maintenance that has to happen. And I don't know. So if you do get into engineering, it's one thing to think about is consulting with mechanics, because they do need maintenance. So I don't know, something to think about. So I was making like $7 an hour, I think, and so I didn't have a car, and I think work started at like let me actually go back at like 5 in the morning, I think, and so that got old after about 6 months or so. So I started working as a barback at Bob Marley's, which is a restaurant kind of nightclub at Universal, and there I met a lot of people that were working there for like 10 years. They were in their mid-30s, making really good money. This is like 15 years ago. They were making like $400 a night, working 5 hours, and it just, a lot of their stories were the same. Some of them went to school, some of them didn't go to school, but they started at a bar because if you have any experience, it's like really quick money, and it's a lot of money, and it can be very attractive. And a lot of them worked for a couple of years, and then it was like each year they got a little more and more comfortable. And some of those guys I don't want to finish or go back to school. Like, I'm making such good money, and some of them have been there for 10 years and might have had a degree in education, but they're like, well, I'm making $400 a night, or I can start teaching, but now I'm like 10 years behind, and I'm going to make way less money. So if you do like decide to take some time off, or you end up, I don't think this is terribly uncommon for you to graduate and then end up like getting some kind of temporary job. I don't know. My advice would just be keep the end goal in mind, and don't get trapped into a situation where you're just getting a lot of money. So I was there, and I had a couple friends that reached out that I actually ran track with here at Oneonta, and they got a teaching job a couple hours south of Orlando, and like, "Hey, you got to come down. We need teachers like really bad." Teaching, I don't know. I guess, it's got to be better. So I went down and I did a little observation, and I'm like sitting in the back of the room, and I'm watching my friends teach. And I'm like, whoa, this is wild. It's so weird seeing like my friends just like up there in front of a group of kids, and like I don't know. And then I applied, went through the interview process, and ended up getting hired. So I worked at a public high school, and I was teaching physics and math. And I was a brand new high school that had just opened up that year. And this is like, again, I felt like I was stepping outside of my comfort zone. I was like literally shaking before I started my first day. But then as soon as I started talking, everything was fine. And I instantly fell in love with teaching. And like, was just every day I was so happy, and I was having so much fun. And I also, what's interesting was, as a bar back, I was working less days. I was making more money than I was my first year teaching. But it was like so much happier. I was laughing all day, and I was joking all day with kids, and like I had fun. And I didn't but I didn't end up in a ditch homeless, and I didn't ever go hungry, and I made it work. There's always ways to make it work. I did some coaching and some tutoring to like get some extra money, and it was worth it because like I was having so much fun all day long, and had the entire summer off, which was pretty awesome. So I still had this goal, like I wanted to be a roller coaster designer. So I moved down to Boca Raton and I started working on my master's in civil engineering. I'm like, let's give this another go. And another thing I found with engineering was that it's like, I was kind of had this perception that engineering was harder than physics. And I don't know where I got that from, but I was really having a hard time with this. We were like solving problems and then we get an answer and I'm like, is that right? Well, it's within the threshold. Like, what does that mean? Is it within the threshold? Like, is it right or is it wrong? And I just remember with the physics problems, it's like we would do whatever crazy, insane math we would need to do to get the correct answer. And then here, there was no like correct answer. There's a threshold, and I just had a really hard time with that. It was like I remember I was taking some classes where it was basically you set up a spreadsheet and then it's a guess and check. Like this hardly feels like, I mean, this is not that difficult. So I don't know, for anyone that is going into engineering, and if you do happen to have that perception, again, I don't know where I got that from, but I found engineering classes to be far easier than physics. So I do feel like when you get through this program, you're very well prepared to handle a variety of areas. I was also a teacher's assistant for a civil engineering materials class. This is again like something I knew a little bit about. I learned like some of the basic things beforehand, but I mean, this involved running the labs, and you're like mixing concrete and doing like the slump tests and everything. I'm like, I've never done that, and I don't know what I'm doing. And but I found out once I got into it, I would just kind of stay a few days ahead of the class and learn it ahead of time, and like it worked out. And like I think for me, the hardest decision was the hardest thing was to make that decision. Like, all right, I'm going to take this on. I'm like nervous. I don't know this stuff, but I'm just going to do it. And then once I started, everything was fine. And then my thesis, for anyone who's interested, it was on these underwater turbines, and my focus was on the design of the blade and looking at or taking a reliability-based approach to determining the safety factors. So essentially, you've got the strength of the material, the blade. You assume it to be whatever strength it has, and then you've got the load. And my job was to figure out like what percentage do we assume the load we should increase it by. So like maybe we should assume that the load will be 10% more than it actually is, and the strength of the material is 15% lower. So that was what my thesis was focused on, was determining what those safety factors were. And then this was really interesting. I based that off of these studies that were done with wind turbines. And there was this guy that I was wanting to reach out to, but I wanted to make sure, because he did a lot of work, this researcher in the field. And so I found myself writing down the questions. I'm like, I got to really make sure that I get this email perfected and that I'm very clear with my questions. And the actual act of me writing my questions down, I found it would take me 2 hours to write the email, because I'm like actually figuring out as I'm writing my questions out, and I'm really determining what is it that I want this guy to answer. I'm like kind of figuring out what I'm confused about. And then as I started to figure out what I was confused about, it kind of helped me figure out some of the actual answers in just writing down what I was confused about. And then when I was finally at that point where I'm like, all right, I can really say, here's what I don't know. And if you could answer these 3 questions, I'll be super happy. And he got back and we went back and forth a few times. It was a really interesting experience. Now, during that time, by the way, I'm just highlighting, I don't know if it's super clear, but I'm kind of walking you through the timeline here, and the box is what I'm about to talk about. And then anytime there's some things that are also highlighted at the same time, these are things that I'm doing at the same time. And I'll get back to that towards the end, but I really missed teaching. I felt like I wasn't complete. And so after one semester, I went back. I kept working on the degree, and I did finish it, but during that time I went back and started teaching at a public high school that was kind of around the corner. And this was, I was teaching some lower level concepts here, and I like didn't really love it. It just wasn't really fun, and I found out I kind of learned about myself that I really liked the higher level stuff, and I started thinking, well, maybe I want to teach at a university. That's about as high as you can go in terms of like the teaching concepts. So I applied to University of South Florida, which is over in Tampa, and I got in and I started my PhD in civil engineering. And the research project that I was kind of, I don't know if this is always true, but that when you start your PhD, at least with the universities that I looked at, you kind of like join with a project in mind. You're either like joining in on a project. So the one that I was joining in on was this project with Boeing, and it was this crack analysis. I wasn't like loving it, but they were paying for it, so I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And it was like I kind of started to learn during this time. I don't know if like my part is in engineering as much as it is in education. It was funny because my first like day with my advisor, he's like, hey, I'm going to be out the first 2 weeks. I'm going to need you to teach my classes, and I'm like, I'm like, I don't, I was like terrified, and I'm also like, but I'm in those classes. I'm like a student in those classes. Is it gonna be fine? Like I saw you, you're okay. Just stay ahead of them. I'm like, okay. Like so I was like terrified, but also like secretly like so super excited. And it was a blast. I loved it. It was so fun. In being in that environment. And at the same time, so after 2 weeks passed, and about a semester in, I was like, I really miss teaching again. And so I ended up applying to a local high school again after a semester and started teaching at the same time. I'll talk about that in a second. But I went through and I was doing all this coursework and trying to figure out what I wanted to study, and I could not find anything. Everything I actually wanted to study was in education. It was like, I want to study flipped classrooms. Like, no, you can't do that. This is a civil engineering program. Okay, I get that. Can we do flipped classrooms in engineering education? No, this is a civil engineering degree. You have to do it. It's like, okay. So I tried like, I could not find anything that I wanted to study. So as it turns out, I ended up like finishing the coursework, but I just never settled on a dissertation topic. So I ended up like just not finishing. And I didn't feel like a failure or like I was giving up. I'm like, this just, I think this just isn't for me. If I can't figure out anything about engineering, like there's literally nothing I can find that I want to study and spend this time doing, maybe it's just not for me. And so like I said, I was at the same time I was doing some teaching. This time it was at a private high school. And this is downtown Tampa. And this was a lot of fun. I had a lot of flexibility here. And I think it was because it was at a private school. I got to teach multivariable calculus and linear algebra. This is like to high school students. And I also got to create a couple of my own courses. And I proposed this idea to the administration. They're like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do it. And so they let me create these two electives. And one of them was called modeling physics. And so that one you'll never guess. The students in this class they broke up into groups and they spent the entire semester building model roller coasters. And they used, we had iPod touches. And so their goal was to take the iPod touch, turn that into the actual like train. And then they would use the internal accelerometer to take different measurements, like the G-forces as it hit the bottom. So it's like I kind of like became a roller coaster designer, I think. I mean, I don't know, like roller coaster designer coach. But that was a lot of fun. And then I had another class that was a computer applications class where they would solve some physics and engineering problems using Excel and MATLAB. So there, like my big takeaway was like I really enjoyed creating new classes, and I really love having the freedom to do like go about things the way that I want to. Like they gave me that freedom there, and I really appreciated it. And I feel like that was at that point like kind of the most heart I had really put into something because it was like my own. So it was Tampa though, and I was sitting in traffic every day and like was like really not liking that, and still kind of figuring out, all right, I'm not a city guy. It's like taking me a long time to figure this out, I guess. But my wife and I wanted to get back to the East Coast, and I applied to a few schools and got one. It was down actually by Boca Raton, which is where I went to get my master's. It was not I didn't have a great experience. By this point, I had been teaching quite a few years, and I had sort of developed my own philosophy and what I thought was really important. And certain things you're probably not gonna find like the perfect job. There's always gonna be things that you don't like. But if there's like some fundamental things that you disagree with, I think it's important to know when it's time to move on. I actually got to the point where halfway through the year, I was like wanting to leave, and I was actually almost kind of convinced that like maybe I am like a terrible teacher. And I was like, maybe it's time to go into engineering. Like I've got this master's, I should give it a shot. I applied to a whole bunch of companies and just got nothing. And finally, I was like, I don't understand what's going on. Like, I have a master's in engineering and I can't even get an interview. And there's one guy who wrote it was a nice, like, no thanks note. And I reached out to him, I'm like, is there any way that I could just hop on a phone call with you? Like, I'm trying to understand what is going on here. Like, what am I doing wrong? And he was a really nice guy. And he did take the call, and he was pretty blunt about it. And I don't know if this is like always the case, but it was for me, at least with this one company. Long story short, he basically was like, you're too old. I'm like, I'm 30. And he's like, yeah, but you have no experience, and we want to take someone who's like 21, and so I don't know what it is. Like maybe they want to be able to mold the people, or I don't know. By having no experience and being 30, they didn't want that. And I mean, it wasn't quite that blunt, but that was sort of the idea. So if you do want to get into engineering, I would recommend that you start right off the bat if you want to give that a shot. I will tell you, you can always get into teaching, and I'm not trying to convince you to get into teaching, but in terms of trying to get into engineering, I don't know, it didn't work for me. But I think it worked out because I ended up sticking out the rest of the year, and I ended up getting a job at actually where my wife and I met up in Fort Pierce, just a couple hours north of Boca Raton. And spent a good chunk of time. I finally like settled down, as you can see. Spent quite a bit of time there, and I taught a whole bunch of courses there, mostly, well, really math. And actually, this is where I got into computer science. When they offered the job, they said, but this does include teaching a section of computer science. And I'm like, oh, I don't know that. And they asked if I was willing to learn. I'm like, yeah, sure. I'll give it a shot. And so they sent me to a week-long training, and I instantly loved it, and I really enjoyed it. And so over the course of the years that I was there, I ended up creating new courses. So we ended up going from offering one computer science course every other semester to having 4 different options at the school. And it was just like the most fun subject I've ever taught. I really enjoyed doing that. And so I held a few other positions at the time. And did I have anything else there? No. Okay. Yeah. So then I started getting into actually doing some speaking at different conferences, and mostly on like kind of bringing in computer science to the high schools. And then I also was able to be the commencement speaker at the high school. And one thing I learned pretty quickly is I really would get into my head a lot. At these conferences, they do their best to try to anticipate how many people are going to attend your talk, because you don't have to sign up ahead of time. You just kind of pick where you want to go. And so there will be rooms half the size as this room, ranging to like a double wide gymnasium. And I don't know what, they always thought mine were gonna bring in these big crowds. So I would show up like a half hour early to get set up, and I never knew what size room I was gonna walk into. I'd always pray it's gonna be like a tiny room, because I just don't love, it's weird. I don't love speaking in front of people, but I just kept pushing myself to do this, and I still don't know why. But I would walk in, it was almost every time it was a gymnasium with these 8-person round tables, and I'm like, oh, why do I keep doing this to myself? And I get set up like 10 minutes before, they'd open the doors and I'm like, oh God. And then I'm like, no one's coming in. And then like 5 minutes later, like, no one's still coming in. And then by the time it's ready to start, there's like 6 people in the room. And it's like one of them's in the back by the door. I'm like, you can come up if you want. And then I would immediately be fine. But it's weird because at the end of the day, I'm like still giving the same information. So even there were times where one of them was during COVID, and it was one of the conferences was online, and I didn't see how many people were there. I was like giving my presentation and presenting my screen, and it was fine. Like I was nervous in the very beginning, but the second I started talking, everything went fine. And at the end, I was like catching my breath. I looked, there was like 200 people on the call. I was like, oh my God, I'm glad I didn't know that. But again, that shouldn't have mattered. I'm giving the same talk. So I learned that I really do get in my head. But the other thing that I learned is that like at these conferences, there's a lot of people who could take 5 minutes of information. I hope I'm not doing this, but they could take 5 minutes of information and somehow spread it over like 90 minutes. I don't know, I used to kind of think, just if you're up there on a stage, you know what you're talking about. But I've learned to be a little more skeptical of that. There are a lot of people, they're not trying to scam anybody, but I think they just, I don't know, I feel like I always used to give people more credit than maybe they deserved, just because they came across really confident. But at the end of the day, I'm like, all right, what did I learn? And then it's like, why did it take so long for me to learn that? Why did they spend so much time? Again, I hope I'm not doing that, but you can be the judge after. Then this is a very small portion. This is only a 3-week portion. I had the best man at my wedding, his wife's brother knew I was kind of getting into computer science, and he's like, hey, I'm working for this company called Digital Media Academy. We have these week-long technology camps that we offer to these kids. If you're interested, and it like paid good money. So they were hosted at all these different universities over the country. So I ended up teaching just these 3 1-week-long classes, and they're like to little kids. So it's not like the actual rocket science, it's like, bottle rockets. But it was a lot of fun. It was I learned that San Francisco is really expensive, and that like I love little kids, but I don't want to teach them. They like when they want your attention, they poke you. Poke me. Yeah. So I don't know. Like that was my big takeaway there. If I do stay into teaching, I'm like gonna stick with the older crowd. But I really did enjoy. I knew at this point, like I love education. Like this is where I should be. And so I decided to go back and go back to school and get my doctorate. But this time in education. I mean, that was what I wanted to study after all. And I did this online through the University of Florida. And I didn't go in with the intention of wanting to like move on to some other career. I just like really loved it, and I wanted to be the best that I could be. So I did this, and the specialization was in educational technology. Learned a lot of different things. So I'm trying to keep my eye on the time now. But one of the big things here, I think that I did want to mention is like imposter syndrome. Have you guys heard of imposter syndrome? Okay. Like I feel like I was experiencing that my entire life, and then I just learned about it. You're like, oh, okay, and like that's what's going on. And I don't know. I don't know really what you do about it, other than like just be aware that it's a thing, and just kind of keep reminding yourself like it's okay. Like you can do this. You know what you're doing. After that, I was like super excited to be done. I remember telling my wife, I'm like so excited. I'm ready for just to be done. Like I want to just work a job, just one job, and just wake up and like be done at the end of the day. But literally, the day I graduated, it was up in Gainesville. My professor, my advisor that I worked with, said, "Hey, we're starting a new computer science education program. Were you interested in working like as a contractor?" I'm like, 100% of me was like, yes. Like 100% of me was like, no. So I know it's like 200%, but like that's what was going on up here. And I ended up saying, of course, I'm like, yes, I can't say no to that. So I ended up working with them and had a few different jobs along the way. But we created this 4-course certificate program for teachers that don't have a computer science background, but that want to shift into teaching computer science, which is pretty much how high school computer science is like taught. I mean, it's mostly, unfortunately, there are people who did not go to school for computer science, but who like learned enough to be able to teach it. And I think that's okay. That's more like to get you introduced to it. But then I had the privilege to be able to actually teach a couple of those courses, and those were online courses. And then we did a little bit of work on this like side job called CS Everyone, which is really just the goal is to try to spread computer science and get more students taking it. And we did some work with, there's a lot of different components. My focus was on building the practice assessments to help teachers prepare to get certified and take that exam. So again, my personal takeaway is like, all right, I'm actually really like the developing the courses part is what I'm really like getting into as well. Then COVID hit and everyone's like scrambling to get their courses online. And the hiring manager at Chapel Hill went through the same program that I did, but like 2 cohorts before me. So he knew, like they were actually the ones that posted this job, like, hey, Chapel Hill's hiring, they want to get people they need help getting their courses online. And so he was able to like talk to my professors who knew about my work ethic and knew that I was working really hard. That kind of, I feel like is what got me in. I was able to get a job with them. And then once I was there, one of the contractors reached out and was like, hey, I'm like, I can't take anything else on. But there's this other college that's hiring for something kind of similar. Just wanted to pass it along. So it's like, I came home and I remember joking, I'm like, telling Sam, like, hey, there's like another opportunity, but this would be my 4th job. And I think it's maybe a little overboard. And, but it was like a quick thing. And so I applied and then I got it. And this is at Skidmore College. And so now I'm like working 4 different jobs, but somehow it was like just working. I just like kind of accepted this new life and just I was busy a lot. But basically what I did here was some instructional design work with Chapel Hill. I was assigned to 3 different professors, and the goal was really to get their courses into an online environment. I had very little, I was not the content person. Mine was like strictly just, I'm here to like help with the layout, and I didn't really enjoy that very much because I didn't have any say with the content. And then with Skidmore, I was more of like a on-call, like brainstorm buddy. So I would get paired up with different professors, and they would have 1 hour, and we would just like go back and forth. And I felt like I was seriously outside of my comfort zone here. Like like one of them was anthropology of Japan, and I'm like, what am I supposed to? How can I? But then I had to keep reminding myself, okay, they're not here to ask me questions about the anthropology of Japan. They're here to ask me about like what kind of things can I do online? Like what are some different programs that are out there? Like and like once I kind of just kept reminding myself, I do know what I'm doing. It's okay. Everything was fine. Okay, so then that I guess brings me to a current position, which is at Patchford. So remember this little 3-week thing here. He ended up reaching back out and he said, hey, my company's hiring. We need someone to do this work. And I'm like, no, thanks. Like right off the bat, I just kind of dismissed it. I'm like, I love my job. I was like so happy at St. Edward's and I had so much freedom and like was just loving it. And then a day or 2 later, I was like, actually, I don't know, like maybe tell me a little bit more about it. He's like, oh yeah, well, it's a remote position and it pays well. And I like, all right, well, yeah, maybe I'll give it a shot. So he actually got me set up with his boss, and we just had like an informal call. This is like where it's really nice to have like a lot of people that you've worked with. And it was like she was really the one that was going to be doing the interview, but she also, as a favor, let me just have like a side casual conversation with her. So by the time I actually had the interview, I already like knew her, and I don't know. So it was like really, really helpful. So I ended up getting the job. And so at Pastoring, what we basically do is it's like an online certificate program. So it's for adults who didn't, they're maybe working at like Walmart or like a bank teller, and they want to like get into something a little more technical. And the idea is to take people who are making like maybe $30,000 or $40,000 a year and like get them up to like maybe like $80,000 jobs. And they go through these certificate programs. So you can see 4 different certificates that we offer. And then how we do that is through a couple of different ways. One's through these business partnerships. So you might hear like Amazon has one of their perks is like an educational perk. So if you want to go to school, they'll pay for it. But with a bit of a caveat that they don't just give you, here's $3,000 a year to go back to school. It's like, here's a catalog of providers and you can pick from there. So we're one of those providers. And then they could say, oh, I want to get into digital marketing. And then these were all these were originally developed with these companies. And then those are like the tools that they're using within that. Then my personal experience, I'm working from home. So again, I'm in Florida. They're a San Francisco-based company. And I would say the best way that I would describe what a learning experience designer is in my experience is it's like a course developer, but also instructional designer. So I kind of get the best of both worlds. I get to work on the content. I learn it as I go, but then I also get to decide like how is it arranged and where's it going and how are we going to be like delivering this content. And then like I said, we've got 4 different certificates. So I lead the data analytics certificate. So I basically kind of am in charge of that and making sure that everything's like running smoothly. And then these are some example projects that we've done just to give you like an idea of what we're doing. So like the project management main like certificate exam that had like a major update. So we went through and had to like update all of our courses. Another one, I know we're running kind of short on time, but another one was like recently our engineer said, hey, we want to shift the software from Tableau Desktop to Tableau Public Web. If you're not, do you guys know what Tableau is? Yeah, I never heard of it before either. It's a data visualization software. So this would be kind of analogous to like if you have a course that's teaching you how to use Microsoft Word, it's like the engineers are saying, hey, we need you to shift this over and teach people how to use Google Docs or something like that. It was kind of like the same sort of idea. Okay, so this is my final slide, just sort of like some overall advice. And most of this, I mean, this is kind of like a recap of everything I was kind of hoping you might take away from this. But in my experience, I kind of just said yes to every opportunity, no matter how busy I was at the time. So I feel like you never know what was going to come back. Like that one little 3-week thing is how I ended up where I am today. And I know like my other experiences contributed to that, but like that was like the most direct thing I feel like that helped me get my current job. And I didn't really actually touch on this one, but in my experience, I've worked at, as you can tell, a lot of different jobs. A lot of people just don't work hard. And that was like in school, I learned that, and just in my jobs. But most people they don't work hard. All you have to do is work hard. And it sounds cheesy, but just work hard and you'll like rise above mostly everybody else. And then, yeah, like I was convinced, like, I think from the time I was in 2nd grade, I'm going to be a roller coaster designer. And then I was like, I'm going to be a teacher. I will always be a teacher. And so I feel like it kind of keeps evolving. And my advice would be open to it, because I did not want to leave my teaching career. I was so happy. I was laughing all day. I loved it. But now I really love my job. And it's just, I'm up here now. And it's like, it's unlimited vacation. And like I could just be anywhere at any time and still be working. And I was like, why would I ever give up summers? Like that's insane. I have the entire summer off. But like there's so many other perks and things that I didn't think about. I just really did not think I'd be able to be happier here. So I'm really glad I was open to the like option or the idea of changing. I mean, it's still the same like industry, but it's pretty different than teaching. And then another theme I was hoping you'd pick up on is like, I feel like my whole career, I was like constantly stepping outside of my comfort zone. I was like, never really comfortable. And I kept trying to push myself. Again, imposter syndrome oh, of course, there's a typo in there.
I didn't see it.
But yeah, just be aware of imposter syndrome, and like when you feel like you're not maybe deserving of something, just take a pause and really think like, well, you know, you're qualified, you know, I don't know, just be aware of it. And I think read up on it if you haven't heard of it. And this is another one with questions that this is more like a newer thing that I'm learning, is it's so important to know like how to ask questions, but then also I found that when I ask questions, a lot of people don't answer them. They give me an answer, but it's not an answer to my question. And it's either because they weren't listening to my question or they don't know the answer and they're trying to fake being able to answer it. So like, if someone gives you an answer and it didn't actually answer your question, call them out on it. You don't have to make them feel like a jerk, but call them out on it and say like, I'm sorry, I still don't understand. And like, be relentless. And if they can't get you to understand it, then they don't know it. And move on to somebody else who might be able to actually answer your question. And then on the other end, when someone's asking you questions, like don't pretend like you know the answer if you don't know the answer, but also answer the question. Make sure like if someone's asking you about something really specific, make sure you're actually answering that question. And I feel like if everyone could do that, at least like in academics, if everyone could do that, like I feel it could be amazing how much progress we could make. And then this other one I didn't really talk much about, or at all actually. But when I was offered the pathstream job, University of Florida, I was still doing some contract work for them, and they said, I didn't know you were in the market for a job. And it's like, I wasn't. It just kind of like, they reached out. And then like a couple of days later, they were like, well, we're prepared to offer you a full-time job. And I was like, what? And I was like, this is awesome. I could be working at full-time at University of Florida. And I immediately was like, this is what I got to do. And I kind of realized like, I would have been doing that because of how it was going to make me look. I felt like when people would look at me, it's like I would have come across like better looking if I was, you know, oh yeah, I work at University of Florida and I lead this computer science education program. But like I think like deep down, I was really intrigued with this pathstream, and like no one knows path. Raise your hand if you've heard of pathstream before. It's like 50 employees, and that's what I like really wanted. But it's like, but no one's gonna know what pathstream is, and like I won't like look as smart. But like I'm so happy with what I am doing now. It was like one of the first times that I actually did something for me versus I feel like how it was going to appear like on paper. And then I think like the most important takeaway is just like, if you just do like what you're happy with, like what you really enjoy doing, I really do feel like everything else is going to fall into place, and just like do the best you can do. And then I think, like I said, it'll all sort of fall into place. So that was it. And actually, that was like, glad I didn't go over time.
You worrying too much.
Well, I didn't want to like, I know what it's like to be sitting down and, yeah. But yeah, so I don't know if you guys have any questions about anything.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
I've been busy, Shaun.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, I thought it was going to be Jacob, but Andrew, I'm very proud of you. Tyler, thank you for being
So when it came to your thesis, when you were at grad school, like that is an extremely like specific topic. How does that like come about?
So for me, I did not seek that out. I had in my experience, it was like there's already existing projects within the department that are going on. So that one was through the U.S. Department of. You're talking about the engineering one. I'm assuming. Okay, yeah. So that was there was like something through the U.S. Department of Energy, and they had like a much bigger projects going on, and then. A lot of the professors like they need students to like get the work done and help them like work on it, and that's basically what happened for me. Yeah, that's not something I would have been like, oh, this is what I really want to do, because you're right, it is so super specific, and it's also not what I would have chosen. I don't regret it, but it's not like I definitely would have tried to do something with roller coasters if that was an option. I did try to do it. I was like, okay. He's like, no. And you know, the other part is that was funded, so like, there was, you know, if I do that, then they paid. So they helped pay for grad school, and then there was like a small stipend. Yeah, so, and that was the same thing with, like when I was applying to the doctorate programs, it was interesting because it was more like, those more like interviews. Once I got accepted into the schools, I went and talked to all the professors and said, well, here's the projects we have going on. Like one was with University of Hawaii was another one. They were doing something with tsunamis. I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. But that's so expensive to live there. And so, but yeah, you kind of like, by that point, I think, and I don't know if that was your experience as well, but like, I don't know, it was sort of like once you get into the schools, you kind of pick, well, what project do you want to join in on if you want to get funded, I guess. But I don't know, was that like it for you guys?
It's somewhat similar. I wandered aimlessly, but I think that is a model. There are people who have funding for projects that need to be done, and there's variations within there, but
Yeah.
But it is a model because if you go to grad school in almost any STEM discipline, you can find a school that will pay your way, and that's one of the ways they do it. That and some of the TA stuff that we're talking about. I would okay. Go ahead, Katie.
To kind of elaborate on that, because you were going, and that was kind of just a project that you really were capable of joining. If you wanted to try to start your own project, or like, because you said that you would want to try to do something with roller coasters, would you have to try to go and find a project that's already kind of like that, or could you propose like?
I mean, you can, yeah, I mean, I could have definitely gone off on my own, but I think there's a couple things, like one, they're not gonna pay for something that I'm interested in, unless I'm doing like a TA, which would be side stuff, so I feel like a research assistant, so the TA actually kind of turned into like a research assistantship, and you get it's kind of like a 2-for-1, you're getting paid, but you're also getting like, to work on your research at the same time, but then the other thing is, you have your advisors like genuine interest in your work. And I think like if you go off and you're doing your own thing, you know, and I'm not saying that they wouldn't be interested, but I can't imagine that like they're going to be necessarily, I don't know, as interested in something that just you want to do on your own versus like something that they've gotten a grant from the Department of Energy and they expect results, you know, but yeah, I mean, yeah, you could absolutely go off and do whatever you want, but I was like, yeah, if you want to pay for this, I'll do that.
Yeah. So that was turbines. We're not going to spend all our questions on your, but that was a turbine system that would be in a stream, and you were examining how well it was going to hold up with a load, with a certain amount of. Was there an experimental component of that, and what sorts of facilities did you have?
No, it was all like theoretical. Like there was some data that they had, and I was like a very small portion of it. So I was handed, God, this is so long ago. I was handed some data, and then we sort of like anticipated like over time what would that be, and there was so many like limitations to it, like over time, you know, like we didn't consider like over time what was going to happen, and then like how the it being in the water, in the salt water, how that was going to potentially like affect it, but no, like I think eventually they've been doing still quite a bit of work. It's off the east coast of Florida, and I think they're now in there, and like it's becoming a much bigger thing.
But you weren't working on.
No, I was like
a turbine design and then fabricating it, and then
no.
Just curious. Other questions?
I love your takeaways and your kind of conclusions at various points. they seem really succinct. Is that kind of a knack that you've always had, or did that develop over time, and what helped you kind of like boil things down to the smallest amount of words that gets your whole point across?
I was told I had 45 minutes. No, I don't, I mean, I don't know, I spent a good amount of time like thinking through this. I actually kind of started off with this, actually times 3. And then I realized like, oh, some of these are really like overlapping. And then over like the period of a month or so, I just was like, well, where did I learn this? And kind of just like fit it and like kind of worked backwards and like built the slides out that way and kind of, but I wouldn't say like at the time, you know, like, I think looking back, I'm like that, yeah, I didn't take that away, you know, but I don't know if at the time I necessarily was like thinking like, yep, like let me, this is my you know, takeaway. But I think looking back now, like, you know, 15, 20 years later, you know, just the actual act of building the slide deck is what really helped me like think through like what did I really take away from that? And
So if you're,
I think you getting your doctorate and working for this company and just all of those things, your writing has improved and you're a lot more thoughtful in your writing now. Your doctorate, it really made you more thoughtful in your writing, and the well, the curriculum that you have to design, because you have college kids, or not college kids, but people that are going back to take this certificate programs, they don't have a lot of time. They're full-time workers. You want them to get the most they can out of the fewest work possible. And I think I see it improving over time.
yeah, I think I think I also don't have a lot of patience for fluff, I think.
Yeah.
And I think and like I said, a lot of people have like an extraordinary ability to like, you know, I don't know, it's like they kind of like teach you that in high school, but they shouldn't be teaching it. When they say minimum of however many words, it's like, well, I don't know if we should be putting a minimum. How about like should almost be the opposite. Like how few words can you get your point across? And I just always appreciate when things are like, if everything just be bullet points, that would be better. I don't know.
also, I think you reflected on the fact that in writing that email, when you were corresponding, that the act of writing and having to write over clarifies your thinking. And,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's a lot of practice. How many of you love writing? But you got to do it, and it's part of thinking, I think, too.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah. So at the beginning, you mentioned that you were getting, at least at Oneonta, you were getting stuck and like kind of giving up early, I guess you could say. But you know, talked with Dr. Gallagher and you kind of worked until you actually truly got stuck. In any of your career fields and jobs that you were at, was there a point where you kind of got stuck and you didn't know what to do? And what did you do to kind of like work around it? Because you can't, I don't know if like you were capable of going over to somebody.
No, absolutely. That's a great question. And it happens like daily, honestly. Especially in my new job, like I knew nothing about project management. I really didn't know much about data analytics, at least in the like context of what we're doing in the program. And so especially in the beginning, I was like, I mean, I would try to you know, learn as much as I could and figure it out on my own. But then, yeah, I mean, it would be the same thing. I still to this day, I do the same thing where I'm like, I'll start writing my question out, and we do everything through Slack. So we've got like, I think like there's got to be 100 different channels, but like, you know, I'll start writing my. I've learned I actually just write my question out on the side because I keep hitting enter accidentally, and it like sends it, and I'm meant to go to the next line. Oh shoot. But also I'll like write my question off the side. It still happens where I'm like writing my question out and I'm realizing, oh, actually, I guess this is what it means. And then I'm like, oh, I don't have a question anymore. So that sometimes happens. Or it's like, I finally boil it down to the point where like, this is the root of my like lack of understanding. So I would like get it to that point because I know they're busy, you know, and I don't want to put all this extra stuff in. I want to get it straight to the point. I want an answer. And if someone has to like try to understand what my question is, I'm less likely to get an answer. So yeah, but I mean, that's a great question. And yeah, it's kind of the same process today. I'm not really, I mean, there's like almost always going to be someone that you reach out to. I mean, I guess until you get to the point where like running your own company. I mean, I will say, I take that back because a lot of the high schools that I taught at, I would be teaching like the higher level, and I might be the only one teaching it. So I wouldn't have someone to reach out to. And you know, that would get trickier. But that was more like, I'm trying to figure out how to solve a problem, but like a textbook problem. And so I would eventually like just spend enough time on mine and figure it out. Yeah.
You did that with your engineering job search too. You call the guy who turned you down and because you need an answer.
Right. I mean, yeah.
I think that you know, I mean, as I listened to that, I thought, wow, that's gutsy.
Yeah, right?
And then the next thing I thought was, and so smart. Because I know some of you were nervous about asking us, well, okay, half of you were nervous about asking us questions sometimes. But people love to be helpful.
They do.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Honestly, and I can't tell you the number of times I've reached out to friends who are like doing something and or just other teachers, or like I've offered so many people help because I've like just gained kind of like a variety of like random skills. Like there's a lot of people like, I wish I knew spreadsheets, you know, and I'm like, what does that mean? And what do you want? And I always say like I'm happy to just make the spreadsheet for you, or if you really want to learn, I can teach you how to do it. You just let me know. And it's like 99% of the time they never take me up on it. I'm like, dang, like I would have actually felt really good about myself if I could have helped you. And even if it wasn't teaching you how to do it, if it was like me putting together this spreadsheet, which would have taken like a half hour of my time, but would have saved you a half hour of work every day, like I would have felt great about myself. But I think people are just thinking, well, I don't want to waste their time. But it's like, I mean, but people, yeah, it's like Dr. Gallagher said, like people really like to be helpful. And I would have felt great about myself, but people just don't take me up on the offer. So yeah, people are very willing to help out if you ask.
So I feel like my story is kind of similar to yours in that as an undergrad, I never would have said I wanted to be a teacher or faculty member. And it wasn't until experiences later in life that I kind of came upon education. And I feel like for a lot of science students, that's a similar path. So is there an experience or opportunity that you wish you would have had in Oneonta that might have set you on that path earlier on in life? Or anything that you might suggest to the students here if they're even thinking about education, like interesting things that they might try and do in their undergrad career?
Yeah, I think tutoring was a great opportunity if you're thinking you might like it. I felt like that was a very rewarding thing that I was doing. So and I think there's lots of ways at Oneonta that you can get into tutoring. I know like at the time, I don't know if that's still a thing, but we had like there was like an actual physics tutoring.
We had a grant for that.
Okay.
That ran out in 2009, I think.
Okay, so not that long ago.
But I have 2 emails asking for physics tutors if anyone's interested. So, I know Dr. French has made a list of students who may be interested in the times in which they might be interested. But
and even if you're not maybe wondering about education, I mean, it is a really rewarding experience, especially when you like help a student who is like really in need of help and is asking for help. And if you can help them get through the course, it's like a really rewarding experience. And I also had, it's a little more specific, but I remember I was tutoring and Dr. Gallagher said, I'd never push anybody or recommend anyone get into education, but you might want to think about getting into education if you don't want to do, if you don't want to get into engineering or something to that extent. And so I always did have that in the back of my mind. So I feel like that gave me like a lot of, I don't know, I was kind of, okay, maybe I might be okay at this.
So down in physical science room 109, the general physics teaching lab, that was kind of there was a whiteboard there and a table, and we had walk-in physics tutoring 2 days a week. You had command of the room. So that was you would be, gesturing and everybody was watching, and so you had an audience. So yeah, a little bit. But it was but I don't know. So that's why I brought it up. Other questions? I got one more. You said seize opportunities, and that's what I want all of you to do too. For example, if there was an astronomy conference coming up and you had done excellent work over the summer, you may want to present at that. And those opportunities don't come around very well.
Even if you're feeling nervous.
Yeah, because you might have to step out of your comfort zone to do it.
Or especially cousin.
Exactly.
Yeah, honestly, like.
But it's interesting, so many of your opportunities, it's not much different from networking in your case. So many things seem to come back.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it was, there were so many things, like, maybe I didn't do that one little thing. I mean, would I be where I am today? I don't know. It's interesting.
All right. Other questions? I do have to say one more thing. I said I was do one more. I'll do one more. With Dr. Craig, you designed the roller coaster that was supposed to stay on the tracks and flip over and then come out the other way. And you built a MATLAB simulation. So it was a movie of it and all the forces that were on. Somewhere on my computer. I don't know. I can't find it, but it was super cool. Did that resonate with it? I love computer programming.
I think, I mean, I really enjoyed that. But that it kind of like went away, I think, but it was just because I had other things that were happening. It kind of like, I mean, I forgot entirely how to use MATLAB, but like I don't know, the type of thinking that went into it, I think that was one of the reasons when I did go to that week-long training, even though it was like 10 years after the fact, I felt like I was able to catch on to the concepts a little bit more, but I think it was not even just the MATLAB, but like having a physics background and like I don't remember a ton of physics, but I know that I learned how to think, and I learned how to be a problem solver, and how to like stick through it and like not give up. And I feel like a lot, it's hard to watch when I see people try something and they just give up. I'm like, you only tried once. And so I think having that background, like going through and struggling so much throughout college, helped a lot, being able to pick up computer science.
When did you learn to ask questions? I know you mentioned that you were able to realize when you needed help in college, but I do find finding the right questions to ask hard. Is there something you resonate with?
Yeah, I think like just thinking through trying to get to the root of what is the blocker? What's stopping you from moving forward? If you're solving a problem and you can't get the right answer, what is it trying to, I don't know, focus on like, what is the actual blocker? Why can't you move forward? And then, I think writing down like, and trying a problem 20 times and starting fresh and like not look, I remember I would like, it didn't help to like try to review my work. It's like edit, it's like trying to edit your own essay. Like that's really difficult because you know what you were trying to do. I feel like if I'd be solving a problem and I'm like not getting the right answer, it didn't really help that much to like look through it. So I like put it off the side and like just redo it, start fresh. And then not that that would necessarily help me ask the question, but I think just, I don't know, I think honestly, I wanted to be 100% certain that like when I went back to Dr. Gallagher, I want to make sure that I can tell him, this is like, if you can answer this one question, I'll be able to move forward. I think that might be where what was going on maybe in the back of my mind. And then just kind of thinking about that and then identifying like, well, what is that one question? And often that's where you have to sit down and think about, like, I don't know, it's a tricky one. I think just putting a lot of time into thinking through where you're stuck.
It's not easy. So it's okay to try.
Spend some time.
And when I sent you away, that was like the 6th time you came into my office.
I know. Yeah.
And
Office
I
hours,
think-
what was that? I don't know what office hours are.
And I think the phrase I said to you was, you haven't banged your head against the wall enough.
That actually sounds very,
But
Yeah.
anyhow,
no, it was dead on. I mean,
but yeah, it's not easy to sometimes articulate and formulate.
no,
You've expressed a number of ways you go about it,
Mhm.
and Samantha has expressed watching you
Yeah.
with a number of ways going
What
about
about the, where you work now? And, you haven't been there that long compared to a lot of people. And so you're trying to get through something, right? And you're trying to move on to the next thing. And everybody's like, oh, that's an engineering thing, that's engineering. And it's like, whoa, they're beating around the bush here, what we gotta do? And Sean's like, let's call the engineers. Why is everybody scared of the engineers? And they're all like, oh, they call the engineer. And Sean like hasn't even been there as long as everybody else. And he gets the engineers on the phone with everybody else. And then, and so he's just like, we just have to work together. We have to ask the engineers because this is where we're stopped. And so he's not scared and he's not nervous to look like he doesn't know what he's doing. And that's a big thing, because a lot of people are like, and then it can also be scared of, oh, that's the engineering team, we praise them. That's how I feel like a lot of your people think, right?
yeah.
And so you're just like,
Yeah, I think being able to put yourself out there is huge, like just
Yeah.
admitting like no one knows everything. And it's annoying when you pretend like you do. So,
he's still bothering people, Dr. Alley.
no, it didn't stop. They didn't stop.
I think it's okay sometimes to say, I'm not sure what my question is, but here's what I've done.
Here's all the things I've tried.
And,
Yeah.
So that, I think that's the thing. Shaun was indicating a number of paths and he's gonna retry it because he doesn't want to wind up, he's not gonna review the work because he doesn't want to wind up following the same path. He wants to see if he winds off a different path, and that's really the question. But anyway, it's okay to say, I'm not sure what my question is, but here's what I've done. And talking through it is helpful sometimes. Just talking.
Yeah.
Sometimes a lot of you have come with questions to us and you start talking and you go, and then,
Yeah, I mean, I had the
you
same.
paid us to sit there.
I've had that same experience.
Don't tell anyone.
Like as a teacher, I'd have my students come up and, I'd have 2 kids at the table and they're both raising their hand. And did you guys talk to each other about it yet? No. Talking to each other. And then they're like, but neither one of us know it. And I'm like, this is kind of cheesy, but I'm like, it's like detectives. It's not like one of the detectives has to know how the murder happened. Like they talk to each other and they figure it out and they bounce ideas around and eventually they figure it out. And like 9 times out of 10, I come back to the students. I'm like, hey, you guys still need help? Oh no, we figured it out. Okay, so all you had to do is talk to each other, and that's a huge one. It's like working together and bouncing ideas around.
It's a good one. All right, I want to Thank you again for making the trip.